The Atlanta Braves got blasted by the Mets last night, but I'm still not worried about Spencer Strider. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, August 13th, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. We're part of the Believe Podcast Network and proudly presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. A little bit later in the show, I want to talk about some of the new prospect lists for the Braves, including the 2025 draftees. We've got Baseball America, we've got MLB Pipeline, some interesting movement, omissions, things like that we'll get to. I also want to talk about this six-man rotation. Snit referenced this yesterday. They're going to try to run a six-man rotation for a while. We'll see how long it works and what changes may have to be made. But before we do that, we've got to talk about Atlanta's 13-5 rout by the Mets last night in Citi Field. They hit 6 home runs, including 3 off of Spencer Strider, who was charged with 8 runs in 4 innings. One of the worst starts of his career from a runs allowed perspective. The 8 runs tied a career high. The 3 homers tied a career high. And in Strider's past 3 starts, he's allowed 26 hits in 13 2/3 innings. And in his previous start against the Brewers, that was the career high in hits that he had allowed, with I think it was 11. And a lot of people, the postcast last night on social media, are convinced that Spencer Strider is completely washed. We need to, and I'm not exaggerating when I say people said we need to DFA him. People said he'll be no better than a 5th starter. I had somebody tell me they had more confidence in Bryce Elder than they do in Spencer Strider. And I think we all need to take a step back. Okay? Yes, Spencer Strider has not been good in the last 3 starts, right? He has struggled. We can acknowledge that he has struggled. But while we are doing that, we also need to acknowledge that if anybody on this roster is going to be able to fix whatever is wrong that's preventing him from being the best version of himself, it's Spencer Strider. And that a lot of the concern from people seems to stem from the fact that his fastball velocity isn't what it was, right? You look at last night's game, on his four-seam fastball, he averaged 96.1. That's actually half a mile an hour harder than his season average. It took another step forward, improving a little bit from where it was in previous seasons, or previous starts. A lot of it seems to stem, people think he's never going to get the velocity back. Even if he doesn't get the velocity back, he can still be a very good starter. I wrote this last night in today's 3 things over on bravestoday.com. From June 8th through July 23rd, he made 9 starts with a 3.02 ERA, struck out 70 batters in 53 2/3 innings. That was with a fastball that averaged 95. It wasn't the 98 of 2022. It wasn't the 97 of 2023. It was 95. And he still pitched to an ERA of 3 and struck out 70 guys in just over 50 innings. So there's 2 different things to look. Okay, let me back up. It is entirely possible that part of the reason he's struggling in his last few starts is his workload. He did not pitch last year. Technically, he made 2 starts, right? He pitched 9 total innings. But for all intents and purposes, when evaluating workload, That's practically nothing. It's a rounding error when you're looking at innings to calculate a workload. And from there, he's already in the 80s this year. He's already dealt with another injury, in this case a hamstring injury, that happened after he made like 1 or 2 starts that made him miss another month. It is well within the realm of possibility that having a normal offseason, non-rehab filled, non-injury recovering offseason, will allow him to better be prepared to handle a normal workload next year. It is very, very likely that a lot of this recent slip in his statistics, again, not his velocity, it was better last night. He hit 98 on some stuff. Again, he averaged over 96. A lot of that is very likely just due to workload. But there's also a couple of reasons to think that he's going to be better next year. And he talked about this, right? So, some of the quotes that he gave last night to the media about this outing. Quote, "That's 2 in a row where I just wasn't able to make hitters uncomfortable. Obviously, I have to make an adjustment and figure out ways to do better." Not breaking new ground there, but here we go. Quote, "Obviously, my stuff's not exactly the same as it has been in years past. I think the last 2 starts, it's actually been a lot better, especially tonight. If you look at at movement profiles, velocity, all that kind of stuff, he's right. His stuff was better last night. He still got hit around, and he acknowledged exactly what the problem was. But still, I'm making mistakes, and in counts, you can't make mistakes in. 2 of those 3 home runs were on center cut fastballs, dead center fastballs. Middle as you can get. And he's been particularly punished on those pitches this year. I put the stats up on social media last night. Most MLB hitters, it doesn't matter if you're throwing 95 or 98 or whatever, they're going to crush a middle pitch. And I put that out on social media last night. If you want to go back and look at it, he's absolutely getting blasted on middle pitches, but it's much worse this year. Here's the thing. He's throwing less middle pitches this year than he did in either 22 or 23. Like, he's not making that mistake as often. Last night, he made some very prominent mistakes at terrible times, and they all got punished. And that's why it looks so bad. And honestly, and I know everybody's not a fan of Brian Snitker anymore, but Snit alluded to what I'm getting at, that returning from major elbow surgery is not just getting back to the majors. There's a multiple different steps to not only get back to the majors, but get back to the pitcher that you were. Quote, this is a quote from Brian Snitker, by the way. "This is a year off of surgery. You're going to go through the peaks and valleys and rough times in trying to get through a year. I've had these guys before, and this is what they go through. And they've just got to keep fighting like they did when they were fighting to get back to this point. He's a guy that's always going to do the work. He's going to be consistent. And it's tough. It's not fun to go through this, what he went through and what he's going through. It's hell to get there, but you have to. You've got to handle it and get through it. It's like this is phase 2 of the progression." And the phase 2 comment, I think, is the perfect way to think about this. Getting back onto the mound in a game is phase 1. Phase 2 is getting your stuff back to where it was before the surgery. Phase 3, and sometimes these come in different orders. Phase 3 is getting your workload back where it was, where you can maintain that stuff through an entire season. Sometimes you complete phase 3 before you complete phase 2. Sometimes you get back to phase 2 pretty quickly. Sandy Alcantara's stuff is back from a velocity perspective, but his locations aren't, and the results aren't there, right? He's going to have like a normal workload this year, which is nuts to think about, but he's not going to have the results. Strider's stuff is better than it was early this year, but he's not 100% back. And he's probably not going to be this year. But here's the thing, and Sten alluded to this. They've got to keep fighting like they did. And that is what Strider is. Strider is a guy that is always trying to get better. And he always wants to win. And like he mentioned, make an adjustment, figure out a way to be better. He had an amazing 2023 season. But because Philly had a really good game plan against him in the postseason, he went out and added a new pitch simply because he struggled in those two those two playoff starts against Philly when it was a very good and very hot team with a very good game plan against him. What makes us think, even if his velocity does not return to averaging 97, which again, he was 1 mile an hour off of that last night, even if his velocity does not return to that 97, what makes us think he's not going to continue to add to his arsenal to adjust for his new reality? Again, if he never gets back to averaging 97 in a season of just being a starter, because remember, in 22, he started off in the bullpen. So his average velocity of 98, I think, is a little misleading because in his starts, he wasn't averaging 98. 23 was the season you should be looking at from a stuff perspective. Can he get back to that stuff? What makes us think he's not going to add a sinker or a cutter? Obviously, I want him to add the cutter. I want him to add both. I mean, I'm a cutter propagandist, but I just love the idea of multiple fastballs. What makes us think he's not going to add, he's not going to do cutter slider or slider sweeper? What makes us think he's had so much trouble with the changeup, getting it to be good, that he's not going to try a splitter? Can you imagine Spencer Strider, fastball, having a fastball, a four-seam fastball, a cutter, a slider, and a splitter? That's ridiculous. Thinking about it sounds unfair. What makes us think he's not going to do that? So everybody who is freaking out that Spencer Strider is now a number 5 starter and Bryce Elder's more reliable than him and all of that stuff, you're in your feelings right now. I get it. It is valid to be concerned. But what have we seen consistently from Spencer Strider in his entire major league career? It's that he is one of the hardest workers in that room. Look at the size of the man's quads. He's one of the hardest workers in that room. And even when he has an amazing season, he's going out and looking for ways to be better the next year. What makes us think, even if that velocity doesn't come back, and I feel like it will. I honestly feel like it will. We don't have a ton of data on guys who had a Tommy John and then had an internal brace without a torn UCL. Like that data pool is so small that we can't say definitively that guys do or don't come back the same way from that order of operations. So until we know for a fact that he's never going to get there, I'm going to assume that he is. And I'm going to assume, based on the work ethic that he showed, based on the cerebralness of his understanding of pitching and biomechanics, that he's got more stuff in the tank, both from a stuff perspective of what he already throws and the propensity to add more if he needs to. Okay? Calm down. Relax. Spencer Strider is going to be fine. He's also not going to have as much workload the rest of the year because Atlanta wants to try a 6-man rotation going forward. Let's talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Encase Cards. Absolutely love these folks. I've talked about it a couple times now. Few of you have already gone out and made your order, but custom sports cards. What's really cool, you upload your source photos. The obvious answer is youth sports. This is my son, Alton. He played his first season in T-ball. He played for the White Sox, was his team. Shortstop, second baseman, and pitcher, because in T-ball, your best fielders at pitcher, and they had to rotate through. And so I uploaded the photo. We chose a background. We chose all the holographic effects. They printed front and back a custom card for him on quality cardstock, slabbed it, and then put it in a frame, which tons of color options to choose from. We chose black because it's the White Sox, black uniform. It made sense. But ton of different options. Has a built-in stand on the back. And they shipped it straight to us. Was an amazing gift. He loved it. He hates the fact it sits on my desk so I can use it for these ad reads. He wants it back in his room. But works for a ton of things, right? Family reunions, fantasy football leagues, employee of the month. I'm really worried I'm not going to win employee of the month in August, that Bandit's going to get it, but we'll see who gets a card at the end of the month for employee of the month. So go to ncasecards.com, ncasccards.com, promo code Braves today, gets you $5 off of your order and supports Braves today. Again, that's ncasecards, ncasccards.com. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. I want to talk about Snit discussing a six-man rotation yesterday. Talking to the media before the game, he said that as of right now, they have six guys up there. They're going to use a six-man rotation. And I have thoughts on this. It's a little bit of an interesting decision, right? He said that he's going to make adjustments if one of the starters is forced to come out of the pen to cover a short start. Like you saw this issue last night, right? Strider made it 4 innings. But like right now, you have Spencer Strider, you have Carlos Carrasco, you have Bryce Elder. That's the rest of your matchup for this series. Carrasco goes tonight, Elder goes on Thursday. Makes you feel great about taking down the Mets, right? When you have Carrasco and Elder back to back. But a bunch of folks trust Bryce Elder more than Spencer Strider, so we'll see what happens. And then Hurston Waldrep, Eric Fetty, and Joey Wentz in some order over the weekend. I'm assuming Friday, Saturday, Sunday is probably the order you get those guys against Cleveland. Because of that, you're running a man short in the bullpen. You only have 7 options back there right now. You've got 3 lefties in Dylan Lee, Aaron Bummer, and Austin Cox. Cox threw multiple innings last night. He also got blasted. He also gave up 3 homers and just in a lot less innings than Strider did. He didn't go a full 3 innings, and he gave up 3 home runs. And so it's one, I'm really curious as to why they're doing this now. And 2, I'm really curious as to when you have to add a starter, when Chris Sale was ready to come back, who is going to be on the way out for this. I understand the logic of running a 6-man rotation because you have guys, right? Like, I guess you want to get Hurston Waldrep starts. And here's the thing. You can't send Carrasco or Fetty or Wentz down, okay? Fetty and Carrasco are free agents after this year. Wentz is still in the organization. He has after this year, he'll have more than 2 but less than 3 years of service time. I actually think he's going to be a Super 2. So he'll have 4 years of arbitration. But he also has no options. So Wentz has looked good enough where you want to keep him in the rotation. And if you try to, like if you just DFA Eric Fetty or Carlos Carrasco, and then you suffer an injury, now you're back to not having enough starters. So I'm guessing that's probably the rationale here, right? That we can't really get rid of anybody short of optioning Bryce Elder to the minors, which you could do. You absolutely could do that. Part of me thinks that this is an effort. We discussed Strider's workload. This would put him on once a week, roughly, given the off days you have left, versus once every 5 to 6 days. So this minimizes his workload a bit. Hurston Waldrep, I do think it's worth pointing out, not that I'm concerned about it or anything, but I do think it's worth pointing out that his workload is also getting towards some of the highest of his career. Although, I think when people discuss that, they're kind of leaving out what he did in college. Like, at Florida, he pitched 101 2/3 innings his draft year because they went all the way to the College World Series. And then he pitched another 29 1/3 in the majors. In the minors after being drafted. So he pitched 131 innings that year. Last year, he pitched 100 and a third. And this year, he's at 113. So he is already at a high in innings, although it's not completely of an outlier when you factor in what he did at Florida in 23, Florida and the minors. Different schedule. You pitch once a week in college. You don't pitch every 5 days like you do in the minors or usually in the majors. But I do think that this can help you with the Strider workload. This can help you with the Hurston Waldrep workload. Joey Wentz did just get stretched back out. He had not been working full-time as a starter. So, I mean, that's a situation where I think it was this year in the majors, he has like 54 and 2/3 innings. Or I'm sorry, he has 62 innings this year in the majors. Last year, he finished with 67 innings in the majors. So this is a situation that helps you a little bit. And again, ignoring what he did in the minors. He did pitch in the minors a little bit in 23. So that was kind of a normal year for him. But outside of that, this does help with workload on some of these guys. So I think that's part of it. And when Sale comes back, this will also help with his workload as well. It's still just really interesting that they have not really been willing to try the official 6-man rotation until now. Last year, they were really big on pushing guys an extra day, buying spot starts wherever they could, but it wasn't a true 6-man rotation, right? They cycled guys through the minors to make that 6th start. And for the longest time, those starters were bad. Like, they got terrible results. Waldrep had 2 awful starts. Alan Winans had some bad starts. Like, they had some terrible outings from those 6-man rotation guys, or from those extra spot starters. And you're probably going to have some awful starts here from Bryce Elder, from Eric Fetty. Some people are going to say from Spencer Strider that he's completely cooked and washed and whatever. And again, calm down. Take it easy. It's a little dramatic. But I get it. Just really curious why it took until now to do it. And then also Snit's comment about they'll figure out what to do if they have to pull a starter to come into a game to make up for a short outing. I'm assuming that's going to be limited to only certain guys, right? They're not going to ask, I don't think they're going to ask Spencer Strider or Hurston Waldrep to come out of the pen to cover somebody's start. If Thursday night Elder gets blasted, they're not going to ask Hurston Waldrep to come out of the pen to cover Thursday's start and then make a roster move for Friday, right? If Eric Fetty is the next guy to pitch, who's going to be a free agent after this year, who's just here to give you innings, maybe you ask him to come out of the pen early to cover a start versus making his scheduled start the next day or next 2 days or whatever. I don't think you're going to ask Strider. You're not going to ask Waldrep. You're probably not going to ask Joey Wentz. Again, guys who are going to be here next year that you think could legitimately be in your rotation. You're not going to ask them to do it. They're probably, because he's a veteran, they're probably not going to ask Carrasco. I think you could, though. They'll ask Eric Fetty. This sounds rude. I don't really care if you ask Bryce Elder or not, because he'll be here next year unless he gets traded, but I don't see him as a critical part of the rotation next year. If he is, either he has completely fixed it and taken a leap, or you have a lot of problems next year. And again, we've talked about this. I have a big piece coming on Braves Today, and sometime soon on the newsletter about off-season plans for the rotation and who you might sign and what the money might look like and all that stuff. Hopefully, you don't get to a place where Bryce Elder is anything better than your 7th or 8th option for your rotation, even if you don't have Grant Holmes for next year. But 6-man rotation, really interesting. Curious to see what they keep doing with it and how long this can last. Because obviously, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And Atlanta's pitching staff has got punched in the face a lot. They are one of the worst ERAs since the All-Star break. Because it's all guys who weren't even in the rotation to start the year. And half of them weren't with the organization before the All-Star break. In Carrasco, in Fetty, and in Wentz. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how long they stick with it. They did get a supplement from a prospect in Hurston Waldrep. We did see both Baseball America and MLB Pipeline update their prospect rankings just in the last couple days to include the draftees. Let's talk about where those new kids are, who's the number one prospect, and who was left off. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about prospect rankings real quick. Because, and we all have to remember, this is not a science, right? These are commonly wrong. But we saw both MLB Pipeline and Baseball America release new top 30s for the Braves in just the last week or so. And these are the first real prospect rankings, or the first national outlet prospect rankings to include drafted players. If you go to the Braves Prospect Composite, which again, you can go find over at bravestoday.com, it's in the resources tab, that's where I track all the different prospect lists. I've cleared out a lot of the prospect lists that don't have these players. Baseball Prospectus and Fangraphs were like February, right? They still have AJ Smith-Shawver and Drake Baldwin listed. I cleared those out, right? I cleared out The Athletic and ESPN. They don't even do a top 30. They do like 15 or 20 or whatever. I put in there Battery Power, the SB Nation site. Prospect team over there does a lot of work. They, as of like August 1st, they put out their ranking, so that's in the composite. MLB Pipeline's in the composite. Baseball America's in the composite. And you can kind of see some clear tiers in the system. Tier 1 is 2 players. Cam Caminiti and J.R. Ritchie. Baseball America and MLB Pipeline both have Caminiti at 1 and Ritchie at 2. Battery Power has Xavier Fuentes at 1, and then Caminiti at 2 and Ritchie at 3. But when you look at, I have a field in the prospect composite, in the spreadsheet, that takes the average of all of the different rankings for these guys. And so you can see the clear tier, because tier 1 is those 2 guys. They are by themselves. And this is really, what do you value more? Do you value proximity? J.R. Ritchie's in AAA. Do you value overall ceiling? Cam Caminiti still is perceived as having the ceiling of a potential like number 2. And just a little backstory there. And I did this back when I hosted the Prospect Pod, Locked on MLB Prospects, which we won awards for. So shout out to that show. I will never call anybody a number 1, like a potential ace. It is very, very rare to ever call someone a potential ace because so many things go wrong and the standard is so high to get there. And I don't mean number 1 as in the opening day starter for this team. Like the Rockies had somebody start on opening day. You wouldn't call that guy an ace. At any given time, and we maybe should do this in an off-season show or something, at any given time, there's maybe 10 or 15 aces in baseball. You will never see me say this prospect's a future ace, a future number 1 for a postseason contending team. That's just not going to happen, right? But Caminiti as a number 2, you can see if everything breaks right and everything develops correctly, you can see that being a ceiling. That is a 99th percentile outcome, but it's there. J.R. Ritchie probably has a slightly lower ceiling, but because he's already in AAA, the floor is higher. Because if he wasn't good enough, he wouldn't have made it to AAA. The closer a guy gets to the majors, to me, the little more certainty you have as to the floor of the guy. So Caminiti is ceiling. He's still very young. He's still in the lower minors. Ritchie is floor, right? I'm pretty confident that he could stick as a major league starter right now. I don't know how good he would be. Number 5, number 4, I don't know. Like right now. Obviously, they won't call him up right now. But he could do it. So, ceiling versus floor. The next tranche of guys, right? 7 guys of the next tier. And it's some combination. There's 4 pitchers and 3 position players. Okay? The 4 pitchers, Didier Fuentes, Owen Murphy, Hurston Waldrep, which that's a rebound for Hurston Waldrep because he was falling down these lists because of all the control issues. So that's a great rebound for him to get back into tier 2. And then Briggs McKenzie, the lefty prep draftee from this year's draft. They overslotted him. He's seen as one of the top prospects for the Braves now, top 7. I think consensus by not quite everybody. Baseball America has him at 9, but for the most part, he's in that second tier. And then position players and Tate Southesine and Alex Lodis. Southasine's the prep shortstop. Lodis is the Florida State kid. And then Nacho Alvarez is in there as well. And I'm not as big of a believer in Nacho Alvarez as a lot of other people are. I mean, in this, he's 5, 6, and 6 in Baseball America Pipeline and Battery Power in these 3 rankings, right? Baseball America has him at 5. Pipeline has him at 6. I personally don't think he ends up being a first division regular, meaning a starter for a playoff contending team. Maybe he's a second division regular, a starter for a team that is probably at best fighting for a wild card, right? Versus a team that's going to win the division. But maybe. Lodis, Southasine, again, you're looking at floor versus ceiling. Lodis feels like he's a pretty safe bet to eventually be a major leaguer. How good he'll be, we don't know. Southasine is very much he's 18. There's a ton of projection left, ton of development left to do. Where is he going to be in 3 or 4 years? The ceiling could be higher. That's it. Now, the one thing I will say about all of these guys is and this is the position players I'm talking about. When the Braves drafted most of these players, it feels like they went for floor over ceiling. And by that, what I'm talking about when I say they went for floor over ceiling is one of the things I used to always say on the Prospect Pod a lot, to the point where people ask me to make merch for it. Your power tool's only as good as your hit tool. It doesn't matter how far you can hit the ball if you can't make contact with the ball. And a lot of these position player picks, not all of them, but a lot of them, Atlanta went for guys who are better known for their hit tools over their power tools. And organizations approach this differently. This is something the Cubs, a lot of the outfield prospects for the Cubs, PCA was an outlier, a lot of the outfield, but they didn't draft him, they traded for him. A lot of the outfield prospects for the Cubs are guys that can absolutely destroy a baseball. The question is, can they make enough consistent contact where that power shows up in games? It's inherently a riskier profile. But if you can find the guy that can hit enough, then you can get an impactful major leaguer. Atlanta's gone the other way with a lot of these position players, right? The contact tool, the hit tool, is good enough to get these guys to the majors, right? The floor is there because the power tool is not that great. And it's not just these drafted guys. You can go back at the position players they've taken in other drafts. Braden Shoemake, Cal Conley, Luke Waddell. None of those were shortstops known for their power in college. And lo and behold, the power hasn't shown up in the pros. And in a couple of their cases, Shoemake's a notable example, the hit tool regressed enough where they weren't even able to stick as major leaguers, right? Waddell and Conley still have not been called up, and I don't honestly expect either one of them, if they do get called up in Atlanta, to stick for any meaningful amount of time. So Atlanta's really drafted position players, when they have, going for floor over ceiling. So you kind of have this tier thing here. There's a couple position players in there, in Alvarez, Lodis, and Southasine. Alvarez, theoretically, with enough adjustment, should be able to make enough contact to stay in the majors. Is he ever going to hit 25 home runs in a season? It doesn't look like it. Maybe with a youngster like Southasine, you have more time to develop that. It feels like it's a safer bet to get a prep kid that has the ability to have decent contact and see if you could build power in there. It's just organizational approaches, right? The next tier is honestly a kind of mix of stuff. You got pitchers in there: Blake Burkhalter, Garrett Bowman, Lucas Braun, Herrick Hernandez, Luke Sennard. You've got position players, a lot of internationals: outfielder Diego Torres, shortstop John Gill. You do have some shortstop Jose Perdomo. You do have drafted outfielder Connor Essenberg they got this year. But it's a lot of, that's your kind of mid-tier where anything can happen with these guys. Notable omissions, a lot of people were surprised that Isaiah Drake is not in there. He was a higher drafted center fielder out of high school. The Braves got him in the 5th round in 2023. And a good part of the reason why he's not in here is because he looked so bad last year, right? And it takes some time for these national rankings to recover when a guy severely struggles, okay? Isaiah Drake in 2024, 74 games between rookie ball and single A, but most of them, 69 of the 74, were in single A. He hit 159 with a 513 OPS, 2 homers, 74 games, 107 strikeouts. He was just bad last year. Now, he was dealing with injury, had a lot of stuff going on, and it's a big transition to go into playing professional baseball, and you're playing 5 or 6 days a week. It's hard. This year, he's rebounded 84 games in single A in Augusta, 260 with a 704 OPS, 5 homers, still struck out 82 times, but in 84 games, less than once a game. Big deal there. Also stole 35 bags. And then you turn around 10 games in Rome so far, 263 average, although he's not hit for power, 1 extra base hit in his 10 hits in 10 games, 10 strikeouts in 10 games. So, he's rebounded, but not enough to show up on those lists. And, I understand Braves fans are not impressed with this or are frustrated with this. I think it's defensible. Now, if he goes on a tear the last month in Rome and then returns for his age 20 season to Rome and looks really good, your midseason updates next year, pre-draft, need to have him on there. But I think it's defensible to not have Isaiah Drake on there right now. Simply because look at it from the perspective of these national guys who are trying to cover 5,000 minor leaguers, okay? He was very bad in his first year. And then in his second year, repeating the level, he did fine. He didn't dominate. He hit 260, which is good. Don't get me wrong. 260 is good. He was still a year younger than the average single A player. But he didn't dominate. 260, slug of 364, stole 35 bags, did get caught 9 times. I mean, he was better, still struck out just about once a game. From their perspective, he did enough where they need to keep following up on him, but not enough to put him on the list yet. I think he'll get there. You have to understand, high school, the speedy prep outfielder is one of the riskiest profiles in the world outside of high school right-handed pitcher. High school right-handed pitcher and high school speedy outfielder are the 2 riskiest profiles in the entire game. So there you go. All right, this has been Braves Today for Wednesday, August 13th. Thanks for letting me go a little bit long, you guys. I appreciate it. Sorry about that. I don't usually go 38, 39 minutes, but that happened today. Do me a favor. If you're listening on audio, leave a 5-star review. Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. We are so close, and I mean so close to 5,000 subscribers. As of time of recording, 4,999. I'd love to put that tweet out before the show even drops, okay? Until next time, this has been Braves Today.